Hi students, welcome to the chapter 2 and 5 recap. We're focusing on listening to a voice and imagery. The first thing that they talk about in chapter 2 is tone. So when you think of tone, think about it like tone of voice. Tone in literature often conveys an attitude toward a person addressed. For example, you could be reading a poem, the tone could be humble, the person writing it could be expressing a sad tone or a glad tone, friendly or condescending. And there can also be more than one tone in a poem. So someone could start off being very friendly and end up being very reflecting or respectful. They could also start the poem being very sad and towards the end turn it around and be glad. So there are more than one tone that you can see in a poem. Irony is another thing that was mentioned. This is important because you will be doing an assignment focusing on irony. So, irony is a manner of speaking that implies a discrepancy. For example, a fire station burns down. So, this would be considered irony because a fire station is, or firefighters are supposed to be the people preventing things from burning, but yet their station burned down. Another example is a marriage counselor files for divorce. The irony here is that a marriage counselor is someone who helps other people work through their marital difficulties, and now that person is getting a divorce. And you can see the list of other examples of irony listed there. Something else to point out is the ironic point of view. This is when an author creates an element of suspense when he or she contrasts the point of view of a character with the audience. The reader often knows something is about to happen, but the character does not. This is also known as dramatic irony. The author shows this through word choice, description, and dialogue. Verbal irony occurs whenever words say one thing but mean something else, usually the opposite. And sarcasm is if verbal irony is conspicuously bitter, heavy-handed, and mocking. There is a short YouTube video that explains this much better, so be sure to check that out in this week's folder. Imagery is also talked about in chapter 5. This is when elements in a poem spark off the senses. So, despite an image being a synonym for picture, images are not only just visual, they can be any of the five senses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. And they can respond to what a poet writes. So, your five senses can be evoked through whatever type of language a poet is using in their writing. The other thing discussed in chapter 5 is haiku. And the reason that this is in chapter 5, a chapter that's focused on imagery, is because haiku consists mainly of imagery. This type of poetry originated in Japan. It means beginning verse in Japanese. And they heavily depend on imagery to trigger associations and responses in the reader. Haikus do not have to rhyme, although some of them do, and they are usually 17 syllables arranged in 3 lines. The first line is 5 syllables, the second line is 7 syllables, and the last line is 5 syllables. Haikus typically focus on the outside world, and they are usually seasonal in subject. You will be writing a haiku this week for one of your assignments, so make sure you pay close attention to this slide. Thank you. That is the end of this week's recap.